Okay, we're here with Peter Christopherson and Thighpaulsandra from Coil at the Supersonic event here at the Custom Factory in Birmingham. And I'd just like to ask a few questions initially. Peter, there's been a lot of excitement here in Birmingham about today's show. I'm just thinking this is probably your first visit to the city for some time.
It's my first visit for a long time, yeah.
Maybe since the days
I can't even remember, yeah, probably since the days of TG. I don't know why, because, you know, Birmingham is like near to a lot of places, but there seems like a bit of a resurgence, of kind of rebirth, doesn't there, of the city at the moment, this area, and a lot of new stuff happening, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it gets a bad press, you know, it's not as grim as people make it out to be. I was just wondering, what now for you is Coil, and how would you describe your current sound?
Well, we're going through a sort of mutation at the moment, which is just as well. That's the subject of this festival, as you know, like transmutation and stuff. We're just now releasing a series of 4 live CDs, and it's weird that when you listen to them, each one is completely different. So in the last 3 years, we've been kind of rather like a snake, kind of shedding its skin, and you know, like every 6 months we seem to do something completely different. In the autumn, we did a tour of Eastern Europe, which was much more kind of song based, and we had performers on stage, Pearson Massimo and John Balance was singing throughout that, and it was a bit more demanding of him than he was able to provide, I think. So partly because of that, but also partly out of taste and choice, our current set is much more sort of stripped down and kind of tighter and sort of leaner in a way. And there's actually, although it sounds like an odd thing for me to say, there are actually more beats and things. It's more rhythmic in a sense in some places than we have been of late. Even the songs that we did tend to be more, not rock, you know, in any sense of the word, but more, you know, conventional in terms of structure. The songs in the autumn, that is. But now what we're doing is sort of within an electronic genre, but hopefully taking that genre to a place that people would find unexpected and more challenging than some.
Sure. Is that a concerted decision, because it seemed that you moved away from the song structure type compositions, like maybe in the mid-90s towards the end of the 90s, like? Is it a concerted effort to get back to that?
Not really, it's just the way things evolve, I think, you know, things become...
If we have a very low tolerance of boredom, when you do something for 6 months and you go, oh, fuck that, let's try something else.
Sure.
That doesn't mean to say, I mean, I do like a lot of the, early Coil songs, and in fact the song that we're going to be playing last tonight is a kind of updated version of the first 5 minutes after death, which was on Horse Rotivator from 20 years ago.
Which is one of my favourites. Like, I must admit, I was very excited hearing your sound check.
It always gets a great reaction. You know, the 3 times we've done it, there's always been a bunch of kind of hardcore Coil fans in the audience that have erupted into sort of...
Is it going to be the first 5 minutes after death, or the first 5 minutes after violent death tonight?
It's going to be the first 5 minutes after Birmingham death.
Okay. I was just wondering, why not previous shows outside London in the UK, except for the Ultimanos Parties show?
Sorry, say that again?
Why not previous shows actually outside London in the UK?
Yeah.
Until recently.
Haven't been invited, have we?
It's partly that, and also we always have a slight reticence to play in capital cities, you know, because people that live in capitals are always kind of blasé about things, and when you get to play in, like the last show we did was in Porto in Portugal, you know, which was an electronic festival in an industrial town that's a port, you know, and the people, you know, charming and really together and nice and everything, but it's a working town, you know, and it's much more, seems like you get better reaction in places where, you know, the people that come to see you are genuine fans, and they're not just there because they want to be seen, or
and also maybe slightly more real people. Like,
yeah,
sure. Who are the members of Coil for today's performance? I was wondering.
Joining Thighpaulsandra and myself is Tom Edwards, who plays marimba, who plays, he played some of our last tours in some of our dates.
He's done some. I don't know how many shows.
Yeah, he's a classically. Is he on any of the albums? Well, he's certainly on the live albums, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he's on any of the recorded albums.
No, he's
I
not on any of the recorded albums.
don't think he is as yet, but he probably will be.
And I saw another person on stage with you. Is
Sean's helping us today.
He's
Our assistant.
our assistant.
Okay.
A glamorous assistant.
Fine, fine. There's going to be a lot of people obviously wondering why John isn't here today.
John told me to say that he's lying in a black bath in a clear spot.
Right. Okay.
He's not doing any of the present series of shows because, as I said, the last shows were a bit too sort of taxing. The thing about our music is that parts of it have a structure that's pre-arranged, and some of the pieces in the computer, although they're triggered live and they're shaped live, it contains bits that are pre-worked. You know what I mean? So so there is a kind of basis, but the actual shape of the show and especially when there are vocals involved, as on the last tour, the direction that a show takes is very spontaneous, not so much in the way of like jazz improvisation, but in a kind of stream of consciousness, sort of Finnegan's Wake, James Joyce kind of way. That there, some of the songs had fixed vocals, but other times John would just go off into a kind of speaking in tongues thing. And the more you open yourself to that kind of creative flow, if you like, the more you are exposed to the sort of risks of opening up a kind of Pandora's box of inherent madness, basically. And at the end of the last tour, John was spending more money than we were taking, on minibars and trashing this and trashing himself, and it wasn't a sensible way to proceed. He's still part of Coil, very much, and very much guide and a guide and friend to us, and we will continue to record with him, but he will not be participating in live things at the moment. Maybe next year.
Perhaps next year. I was going to ask you that. Yeah. Okay. For 16 years, you didn't go anywhere near a stage.
Yeah.
You returned in the end of '99. After 16 years.
Yeah.
What precipitated that decision?
He did. Thighpaulsandra, it's his fault.
I said, because when I joined the group, they weren't playing live. I thought this was ridiculous. We've got to be able to do this live. I said, come on, it's not hard. I thought, no, we couldn't possibly. So I said, it's very easy.
And have you been enjoying it?
Oh yeah.
Thighpaulsandra has had the benefit and the advantage and wisdom to work with a lot of very eccentric artists in his spangled career, including Julian Cope and a number of others, and unfortunately he was able to convince us that we could do it. And as it happened, the technology just at that exact time became available to do the things that we do.
Sure.
That use, as I said before, use sound that's pre-planned, but at the same time you have the scope to take the flow in different directions and to affect it. So one of the reasons we didn't play for 16 years was because we had no interest really in standing in front of a backing track and just adding twiddly bits. We wanted to be able to do a thing that was as live as it was possible to get using the sounds that we use.
I see. Because that leads on to the next question. Reading an old interview of yours in Tape Delay from '87, if you remember.
I have no recollection of it as well, but I'm sure I said something good.
Yeah, it's a very entertaining interview, and you said that playing live at the time was tricky or possibly difficult for you, excuse me, because you hadn't worked out what to do at that stage. Presumably that's...
For that reason, really,
That's changed completely now.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we do, you know, as I said, every 6 months, you know, we'll probably work on a different set, and during those 6 months, the set itself will change and mutate, and we'll add things and take things away and stuff.
Sure.
But if we were recording now, I wouldn't necessarily use the songs that we play live on a record.
Right.
You know what I mean? If we were doing a record, I might do something totally different. Because the thing that we developed for a live audience is unique, you know, to the people that come and see us on that day and pay the money to see that show.
And that's probably one of the exciting things for your fans, and what maybe stands you aside from other acts and from other conventional live performance, maybe.
Well, I hope so. I mean, you know, as a kid, I would go to loads of shows and see loads of bands from, I don't know, Butthole Surfers, you know, through to Nine Inch Nails in a way. But now, those kind of shows actually don't interest me, because you know that you're going to hear 50% of the hits from their back catalogue and there's a few new songs. You kind of know, with the best in the world, the way that the show's going to go.
Sure.
And hopefully the people that come in tonight haven't a bloody clue what they're going to hear from us. Hopefully it'll have our sensibility, you know, and our choice and taste and ability and skill or lack of it or whatever. But it's going to be something new, you know what I mean?
Excellent.
That was the impression I got from hearing your sound, checking it. It sounds like the technological side of things changes almost every time you sort of go through a mutation process. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
Would it be right in thinking like your studio must go through major changes, and certainly over the last
definitely
10, 15 years?
Yeah, I mean we do still keep old
Everything.
Really? So you've got
not everything. We do try and get rid of some items occasionally, but yeah, I mean there's, you know, obviously retro gear has its own charm and its own use, and nowadays you kind of have to keep computers of each generation, because new computers won't run old software. So you sort of gradually get an assembly of like a museum, you know, of pieces from different, you know, eras, an era in electronic music lasting 3 or 4 years. You know, so every 3 or 4 years you need like another room. You know, it's like Andy Warhol. You need a box, you know, with a date on to sort of keep gear from then. A lot of the software that we used, like on Nine Inch Nails remixes, for example, that software won't run anymore on new machines. You know, it's totally frozen in time. And I'll be using things tonight that I've never used before on stage, and in fact, you know, OS 10 versions of plugins and stuff that only were released by the company in America 2 days ago, 3 days ago, whatever. And it'll, you know, there's an element of exploration and risk, and probably it'll go horribly wrong.
It's almost a perishable kind of quality.
It is, yeah.
Technology.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, because we're not, you know, folk or rock musicians. We don't play the same instruments, you know, using our practice and ability to make the sound come the same each time. We use, you know, electronics and samples and sound that's encapsulated in RAM or on a disc to make the structure. Then the you know, the charm or the live quality comes from exactly that thing you're talking about, the perishable, you know, nature of software and the way that all those, you know, the things interact, and you know, you get interference from smoke machines in monitors, and you know, that actually that's all that stuff's exciting for me, and it makes the experience more interesting.
So you still have like the same enthusiasm for recording as you ever did?
Yeah, very much so. But the enthusiasm comes from that quality of perishability and vulnerability, you know, of machines not to work. Half the time, you know, the sounds that have meant the most to me in my life have been when, you know, an eventide jammed up and it made this most extraordinary sound. There was nothing to do with the way it was designed or you know, intended to be used. You know, those chance things are always really good.
That kind of leads on to my next question, which was, today's festival is about sonic modification, and for many people your music is the pinnacle in the treatment and manipulation of sound. And do you think there are still boundaries to push out there? do you try and are you constantly pushing further with?
Well, I'm
that
constantly
aspect?
pushing with the way with using devices in the way that they were not intended to be used. I mean, I do occasionally use a preset, but in principle, I disapprove of the use of presets.
Sure.
You know, but
It's cheating.
just because it's just somebody else's work.
Yeah.
And the boundaries, until such time as the boundaries are always going to be changed, because in the future, when there's a machine that works like somebody with Tourette's, a machine that can hear a sound, the Tourette syndrome, where people spontaneously swear and twitch and repeat things, snatches of conversation that they heard. If you could make a machine that was like it had Tourette's, that would hear a sound from somebody in a Ford Escort driving by, with one of those bass kicking things going on, and then would spontaneously come up with another sound, that was based on that, but that was controlled by the mind of the person that was running it. The sound, the possibilities of sound are completely endless, and what's great for me is that there are constantly new ways of manipulating it and changing it based on the taste of the person that's at the controls.
Sure. I'd like to ask Thighpaulsandra a question. You have a new CD called Double Volga. A couple of questions about it. You've had problems with the sleeve art.
Yes.
Has that been resolved?
Yes, it's out, and by juggling the images around and putting the supposedly most offensive ones on the inside, we seem to have got around that problem.
Okay.
It's difficult finding a printer that would actually print it.
So it has been slightly modified.
Very slightly, yeah. I think the guy who printed it had to send all his workforce home and print it himself.
Sure.
So
It's weird that the sensibility of people is so variable depending on how they feel or what they think the person standing next to them is thinking. You know what I mean? It's like people are quite happy to have magazines on the top shelf of every newsagent in the country, even in the smallest village, that show erections and penetration and stuff like that. But if, like the photos on Double Volga, are really quite tame, and they don't show anything too necessarily extreme, and certainly nothing that wasn't consensual. But because people in the factories that pack CDs and print digipacks and stuff, are worried about what the person standing next to them is thinking. You end up with a kind of mob mentality of I do not want to be seen approving of that.
It spreads like a virus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's often not hurting the people, the individual person, but as you say, the next person along on the production line. It's often a case of not wanting to lose face.
And that whole kind of movement for censorship and for moral control of the way that other people behave is about that. It's about people not being comfortable with being seen by their colleagues to approve of something.
Yeah.
If you ask them in private what they thought about it, they'd probably say, well, it doesn't bother me because I'm not affected by those kind of subjects.
Or perhaps they'd maybe go home to the hardcore porno mags.
Quite so.
Yeah. Where did the title come from for that?
Good question. I was trying to make very vulgar sounding music.
Sure.
It's quite simple. I wanted to produce kind of vulgar images to go with it, and also there's another part to it that's going to come out later this year.
Yeah.
So it's
Do you mean vulgar in the sense of rude, or vulgar in the sense of like the common
Both.
people?
Both. Or in all senses,
Right.
and double in many senses too.
I've read that it was the cleaning lady, Thighpaulsandra, who cruelly exposed you to pop music.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, my parents were very strict, and they're both classical musicians, and no, we weren't allowed to listen to pop music in my house. So when my parents were at work, and my mum's cleaning lady was there hoovering up, she'd have Radio 1 or whatever it was called in those days,
Mm-hmm.
the light programme on. I used to listen to the Beatles and stuff, and surreptitiously buy Beatles records. And,
The evil Beatles.
yeah. So I used to listen to all this stuff in secret then. And,
Right.
we didn't have television either. We weren't allowed to have television.
And it just progressed from there.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in the new book that's just about to come
England's
out.
Hidden Reverse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
England's Hidden in Reverse, written by David Keenan, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just been released, and the initial copies come with a CD.
They do, yeah. I think, as far as I know, I think all the hardbacks come with a sort of like a compilation track it's a compilation CD of tracks from all of the artists in the book. In other words, Coil and Current 93 and Nurse with Wound.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Rose was about track on that.
Uh-huh. And could you tell us what the Coil tracks are going to be on that, or are you not sure?
It's a track that's already been out.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know which track it is, but I know it's not a new track now.
Okay.
We do a lot of these
But
things.
no, the reason for the CD in there is really to give people that might know of one of the 3 or 4 bands involved, but not so much be familiar with the others.
And hopefully.
So there's
push it along.
just illustrated a bit more. Yeah.
Sure. Can I ask you about your lifestyle and your general ethos, particularly ritual? In the past, I've read that ritual is very important to you, or has been. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think it's well. Depends what you call ritual. You know, there's a ritual. To me, is a line. You know that goes between the Archbishop of Canterbury at one end, you know, or Catholic, really the Catholic Church, or the Pope, really at one end, you know, swinging their censers of incense, through to Gaza at the other end, you know, who has to compulsively move the towels around his bathroom because he's got obsessive compulsive disorder, you know, and that's ritual too, and both of those are ritual on different ends of a long line.
Yeah, sure.
And what both of those two people, the Pope and Gaza, have in common is that they're trying to retain or achieve control of those forces in their lives that they find difficult to come to terms with,
Yeah.
or that they find important in a supernatural way. It's exactly the same for people with obsessive compulsive disorder, who have to go back and lock the door 10 times, and the Pope, in a way, who has to, you know, do things with glasses of wine and Jacob's crackers and things like that. They're both doing the same thing, and it's a thing that I do, but the way that I do it is sort of more in the middle, in the sense that, well, actually, another reason that Pope and Gaza both do it is to make themselves feel better about the work that they have to do to achieve the results that they're trying to achieve with the most effect.
Yeah.
You know, Gaza to score a goal, the Pope to indoctrinate some people in, you know, Brazilian jungle or whatever he does. I don't know. And what I do is make music generally, or sometimes I make pictures and videos and things as well. And the ritual that I do tends to be focused on getting me in the best frame of mind to do that work with the maximum clarity and purity.
That's what I was.
And strength.
That's what I was going to mention. Do you think ritual is part of very important part of people's life without people realising it, to ground them into what they consider to be a more meaningful existence?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it can be. You know, people do it, all kinds of things to do that.
Is there a difference between ritual and routine?
Yeah, because routine is something that you take shelter in, and ritual is something that you use to take you in a way beyond the routine of every day and make an act or a date or a record, more than it might have otherwise been.
Sure.
But I do think that in general, in a secular society that we have today, people are not given the training or the encouragement to maximize their appreciation of what they see around them or what they hear on the radio, or also their appreciation of their own unique talents, because everybody has a unique ability to do something, but by and large, especially in England, our society is set up, or got itself in a position where we discourage people from thinking that they have a unique talent. And in the same way, we also discourage people from achieving any greater than an everyday standard. Like anybody that's got a task to do, whether it's boxing up live CDs or fixing a carburetor or working in a shop or whatever it is, the general sort of style nowadays just seems to be, what's the minimum I have to do to get this done, and not how can I make today's work fucking brilliant.
Yeah, sure.
And ritual is a way of taking you out of that minimum expenditure routine.
Yeah.
So it's something that's quite heavily incorporated in the music that you do, I suppose.
Well, there is nothing really very routine about Coil.
Sure.
So yeah, we are dependent on trying to prepare ourselves as best we can to do what we do, because otherwise it would just fall apart completely.
Yeah, just taking people out there, in a sense.
Yeah, it's true to say that, as well as getting ourselves into the right frame of mind and the right kind of mental state to do a show, one of the things that we would particularly aim to do with a show is to try and encourage people to come with us, if you like.
Yeah.
There's it's a well-known part of hypnotic states, and therapy. Paul, what's his name? Paul, the hypnotist, Paul McKenna.
Yeah.
Most of the things he's famous for are making people, or encouraging people to play the fool on the TV. But he also does, therapy and training to encourage sportsmen, to get in their peak conditions and stuff like that. And I've done some things with him, and one of the things that he does is to try always put himself in a sort of mental state to encourage the person to come kind of with him and into states of peaks of performance. And it definitely works, if you can get the attention, the total attention of the person you're talking to or playing a piece of music to, you can actually together, you can go to places that otherwise would not have been possible.
There's a heightening of focus as much.
Yeah, it's focus, and it's I don't know. It's almost like there aren't words to describe what happens. You know what I mean? In a show or in one of those kind of sessions.
The next, is that loud? Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. Because my next question is in Donald Cammell's film Performance, Mick Jagger's character says that the only performance that really makes it is one that achieves madness. Is that something that rings true for you, or do you...
Well, it's like what I was saying earlier about John. It is... There is a kind of derangement, of a sort of obsessional focus on what you're doing on the music to the exclusion of all else. And you always hear those stories about people who are in, see their kids trapped under lorries, who lift out the lorry because they had to, and only afterwards they discover they got broken wrists or whatever it is. You know what I mean? It's like, in the same way, I actually don't really have very much recollection of any Coil show. I mean, I remember the places and environments, and I sort of vaguely remember going on stage, and kind of vaguely, I have sort of little fragments of snapshots of things during the show, but it's not like I'll remember this interview. And that's because you do go, it is a kind of a divine sort of concentration or divine madness. I mean, how do you define what that word means, really? But it's a pretty good movie, and I've got pretty much vouched for everything in it.
Yeah. The madness maybe comes from a passion. Would you say that you only have a propensity to go insane if you really care about something?
It certainly helps.
So your music's always conveyed extremes of light and dark, at least from our point of view. Is there a specific aim to evoke personal fears and exorcise them in your audience?
I don't. No, not particularly. The main motivation of all of my work has been to expose and overcome the fears in me, and so that they're personal explorations, if you like, and it's in a different way and in a different medium and in a different time. I sort of feel like a kind of 19th century explorer, who's kind of some stuck-up, toffee-nosed git who's decided to go into the jungle, come what may, and has really no idea what he's going to find there. In the more dangerous situations that person gets in, the more they discover things about themselves, where they have reserves of courage and where they don't, and where they're able to overcome difficult situations and not.
It sounds a little bit like the track Panic on Scatology, where you said pitching yourself into chaos produces this compulsion to create order from the chaos you find yourself in. Is that a fair comment?
It's fair. I mean, I think that order and chaos both have a place. And a world that was entirely ordered wouldn't be as exciting as one that has some chaos in it. But likewise, a world that was entirely chaotic, it'd be impossible to function. So I think both have their place. But to get back to your previous question, we never really aim to sort of frighten. And a lot of times, the subjects that we think of as dark, it's not really necessarily because they're frightening. It's because it's in those places that you learn more about yourself. And if there is an objective or a motive with Coil, it's not so much to scare people or to be shocking or any of those kind of things, but to encourage people to come with us, on a walk through, a dark cave or whatever, of whatever metaphorical kind, in order that they might see the things about themselves that we found out about ourselves visiting that same place.
Welcome to the labyrinth kind of thing.
Your music certainly has frightened people that I've known, but at the same time it's given them probably immense inspiration. I suppose the two extremes there, is something that you don't often find in people's output at all. I mean, there's very few artists that can achieve those two extremes, you know. So I think that's something. It's not really a question; it's a compliment.
Yes, thank you.
Just to say that it's done it for me, you know.
Yeah. Likewise.
I don't know if it was more to do with John, but what inspired Time Machines?
Time Machines actually originally came from John working with Drew McDowell, who worked with us in Coil during the mid-90s, and at that time we had we still have some called MS-20 and a lot of Korg stuff which had a quality that was seemed like different from a lot of other synths that are around, though it was sort of famous in the early 80s maybe or something.
Early 80s.
Yeah. And because neither particularly Drew nor John were sort of very computer literate. I mean, Drew would, I think, use Cubase a bit, but John has never been particularly computer literate. He relied on me to do that stuff. And they enjoyed at that time going into a room and cranking up the tones and stuff that was coming out of this Korg. And it suddenly became clear that something was happening in the room over and above just listening to pulse beating sine waves and stuff. And I wasn't actually present in the very first sessions, but it was obvious as soon as I went in the room that I came in that something was happening to me, and they'd obviously been feeling it as well. And that was why they kept going back into this room with these relatively simple kinds of sounds, but there was something happening. And the more we got into it and the more we started looking at it, the more it became apparent that it was a hallucinogenic effect, not having taken any drugs or taken anything to change the way they were feeling or the way they were perceiving the passage of time and stuff like that. And so we looked at it more, and we did a lot more recordings and different combinations of frequencies and different combinations of equipment began to produce what we felt was a repeatable effect in us. And those effects, as our investigations and research developed, those effects were comparable in our minds anyway with the effects of the chemical molecules that are the names of the songs, because we'd had, obviously, Coil are a drag band, and we had had in the past quite a lot of experience with different hallucinogenics and stuff that were not kind of readily available on the black market.
Yeah.
And
would you say you actually experienced some form of temporal displacement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. And not just temporal displacement, but visual displacement. Not necessarily having hallucinations as such, but seeing things mutate and modify in just the same way as today we're getting examples of sound modification, but time, perception, and experience.
Is that comparable to in a fairly recent interview you talked about projecting sounds into the ether? Is that a comparable thing, or is that something distinct?
No, I don't think there's particularly a relationship there. I mean, sound obviously.
Some sounds lend themselves, and some frequencies lend themselves to.
Well, some sounds. The sound is such an emotional thing, and from the traditional sort of conservatively accepted techniques, like a minor chord makes you feel different from a major chord, and different kinds of harmonies produce different kinds of results on one end of the spectrum. In exactly the same way, different kinds of synthesizers, different kinds of tones, different kinds of beating of tones produce other effects in the human psyche and body. You know, and all that stuff's interesting for us to research. You know, to me, you know, like 30 years ago when I started throbbing gristle with the others, you know, we thought it was pretty fucking amazing that you could make someone shit themselves or throw up.
Yeah.
To me, that's not actually very interesting anymore, because if I wanted to do that to myself, there's plenty of easier ways than getting very expensive amps to do it. You know what I mean? But I am interested in the way that different kinds of music makes me feel, and I'm interested in sharing that with other people.
I just wanted to ask you. Sorry, I just wanted to also just ask you briefly if you're aware of the surrealist French philosopher Georges Bataille, particularly his work The Solar Anus, because imagery of both suns and arses figure fairly heavily in your work, and I'm thinking particularly again about the Scatology album cover, which could be either of those things. I just wondered if you were aware of him, or if you were fans.
I know the work of Georges Bataille. I mean, I'm not a great, you know, an expert in that particular field of literature, but you know, I think, you know, every part of, you know, the human psyche and mind and body, you know, is fascinating to me. And you know, in Arabic, you know, they call it us the terma, you know, like terminus.
Yeah.
And you know, it seems like appropriate as something that's like the final frontier. You know what I mean?
Do you think that, you know, part of the repulsion and obsession with shit is kind of manifested in households up and down the land every day, and as much as many people can't resist that little peek into the YouTube, just to see if it's firm or not, or whatever it looks like, you know.
I think it's, you know, everybody does that. Everybody has a wank. For God's sake, isn't it about time we could talk about it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure. Just to draw the interview to a close, Peter and Thighpaulsandra, you're close to nearly 20 years of Coil. It's a long time. Can you foresee yourselves still? You see it still taking shape in another 20?
Well, I don't know if it'll be Coil, because, you know, everything mutates. You know, Coil mutates at even faster rate than most bands, I hope. But I personally suspect that the way that sound makes you feel, or makes me feel, will be as vibrant and exciting and vivid in 20 years' time as it is now. And as long as I have, you know, the energy and the latest Macintosh, you know, I'm going to be wanting. I may not be in England, you know. By that time, I might be in some monastery on the top of a mountain in Burma or something like that. But I'll still have a Macintosh, and I will still be making sounds, because that's one of the things that turns me on.
Sure.
And you know, hopefully, I can bring them to other people.
Sure.
By that time, it'll probably be on the broadband, you know, whatever. I don't know.
Probably even up the top of the mountain as well. Yeah. Are you looking forward to any other acts today at today's festival? Anybody that you're looking forward to?
Well, we got loads of sort of friends and acquaintances that are playing. So I mean, I'm pleased to be involved with it all, really. And there's some people, the people that I haven't heard of, I'm actually looking forward to finding out what they do. So that's cool. I think it seems like it's a really good, you know, combination of different acts. So I'm excited.
Good. Well, thank you for talking to us, Peter Christopherson and Thighpaulsandra from Coil, and good luck with the performance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Peter.
Thanks.